Welcome back. What if the reason your life has not changed yet is because you're trying to create a new future with an expired identity? What if the thing holding you back is not the circumstances, not your finances, not your past, not your lack of an opportunity, but the fact, psychologically, emotionally, energetically, you're still being the same person? Yeah, I know that's hard to hear. Because most people think transformation means adding something on. Adding more discipline, more confidence, more motivation, more knowledge. But real transformation is subtraction. It's the painful process of removing who you had to become in order to survive, so you can finally be who you were meant to be. In that process, it doesn't feel very exciting at first. It feels terrifying, because every single breakthrough in your life will require an identity death. Not a physical death, but a symbolic death. And death, even symbolic death, it feels like loss. Your next life cannot fit inside your current identity. You cannot carry your old self into a new season forever. Eventually, something has to end. And maybe that's where you are right now, somewhere in the in-between, between who you used to be and who you're actually becoming. You're too evolved to stay the same, and yet maybe hanging on because you're too afraid to fully let go. And that's it. That's that space, the in-between space. That's where people either awaken or retreat. And today? No. Today we're not retreating. Today we're talking about the grief of growth, the loneliness of reinvention, and the fear of becoming unfamiliar to yourself. And most importantly, why the discomfort you feel right now may be proof that your transformation has already begun. So let's go. Because it's impossible to create something on top of something. To truly create something new, you have to start with a blank canvas. You have to let go of where you were in order to get to where you're going. And this is a relatable struggle. You know what's exhausting? Pretending you're okay with a life that no longer fits you. Pretending that the old version of you still feels aligned. Pretending that the conversations still inspire you. Pretending that the habits will still satisfy you. And pretending that the goals still matter. But deep down inside, something inside you, deep, knows you've changed. Or maybe just that you're starting to change, is starting to see the awakening, a genesis of something new. And that realization creates an incredible internal conflict. Because there's a part of you that wants growth, that wants to move forward, that wants to move on and become. And then there's this other part of you that wants familiarity. It's like the ego, the sense of identity. It has a vision of who you are. And anything that threatens that image of who you actually are in its eyes, it will bring fear. because its only job is to save you, to keep you small, to keep you from getting hurt again. It's the one that says, never going to let that happen again. See, one side says, I want more. Hopefully. And if you are recognizing this conversation, you're in this already. Because you do have that side, that conscious, that deliberate conversation that says, I want more. And the other whispers, what will it cost me? And it puts fear down. You know, this is something I'm pretty familiar with. Because I remember years ago when, I would kind of go from job to job, always doing well, but never really, really achieving much or creating anything in a direction of my true purpose that I knew was to help people. And I would go from job to job to job because I wasn't really good enough to have the ultimate success. But I was good to have like the small success in the places I was with a small number of people. I wasn't smart enough to go back to school, and I wasn't disciplined enough, and I didn't have enough money. And there were so many reasons. I was such a reasonable person. I was full of reason. And I remember hitting this level of stress. Literally coming up against with the potential of dying in the cardiac ward of a hospital, realizing this is how it ends. And I realized I can no longer be this person who keeps on floating from place to place. That I needed to take charge and I needed to consciously create something because there was still time, but the time was getting short. And I would rather fail going for my dreams than succeed at a life that was mediocre. And that's when I quit that job and I went back to school. A lot of us think fear is our enemy, but it's not. The true enemy is familiarity. Because the brain doesn't prioritize happiness. No way. That's not what it's looking for. It prioritizes predictability, stability, keeping within a box. And that means your nervous system would rather keep you trapped in a familiar hell than risk an unfamiliar future. And that's why people stay in toxic relationships, stay in jobs they don't love, stay in limiting environments, and stay in identities that are actually destroying them bit by bit, like a cancer eating away at everything. Because at least it's known and at least it's predictable. And every time you try to evolve, your mind panics. Not because you're failing, but because your identity feels threatened. It's threatened. And it has the ability to defend itself with the inner critic, with the inner negative internal dialogue, with its attachment to the sympathetic nervous system. And this is something most people don't understand. Your ego is not committed to your growth, not at all. Your ego, your sense of identity, your inner critic, it's not there for growth. It's committed to holding and maintaining the status quo of your current self-image. Even if that self-image is limiting, painful, and actually destroying your life. It wants to keep it familiar. So when you try to become more confident, more disciplined, more visible, more authentic, your mind reacts as if you're in danger because you are. It's threatening your identity because it's designed to keep you safe by keeping you small. And that's why growth feels unsafe. Your nervous system confuses unfamiliarity with danger. Think about that and feel that, not just say it. Your nervous system confuses unfamiliarity with danger. You're not weak because transformation feels hard. You're actually human. It's like, if you think of it, transformation is double hard, right? Think about it. Because you're pushing somewhere you've never been. So it takes effort, it takes strength, it takes consistency, it takes resilience, it takes everything. But it's double hard because you have a sense of identity who's trying to keep you safe, trying to stop you from change. So it's fighting against you. So not only are you coming up against barriers physically, mentally, emotionally, but you're also coming up against your internal dialogue, your ego, your sense of identity. And the truth is, every major evolution in your life will absolutely require, the cost of evolution is the death of the old you and the grieving of the person you once were. Not because that version was bad, but because that version cannot take you where you're trying to go. So let's talk about the identity prison, because it is. Listen to this. Let me ask you something. Who are you without your story? Who are you without labels? Who are you without your pain? And who are you without the failures you attach meaning to? Who are you if you stop introducing yourself through your wounds? Because many people do not just carry pain, they build identities around it. I'm the anxious one. I'm the shy one. I'm the overlooked one. I'm not good enough. I'm the person who always struggles. I'm the person who never finishes. I'm the person who gets abandoned. I'm the person who's fast, but not as fast as I want to be. And the problem is, after years of repetition of the same stories over and over again, these stories stop feeling like experiences and they start feeling like the truth, and they become your identity. But hear me clearly. You cannot create a new future while worshiping your old identity, intentionally or unintentionally. Your personality is not permanent. It's fluid. It's moving. It's changing. It's growing at all the time. Your patterns are not your destiny. Your current identity is not your final form. I think of it. There was a time, talk about this before, it's like when I was younger and I had this internal dialogue, this inner critic who just was so harsh. It's like, you suck, you're a loser, on and on and on. You'll never amount to much. You goof, you idiot, that was stupid. And the funny thing is, I didn't know that inner critic, that inner dialogue, that sense of identity, I had no idea that wasn't me. Like, it's not me. It's an aspect of me, but it is not who I ultimately am. I actually get to choose that unless I'm falling into that trap. So I felt like I was in this war with myself. I was in this massive war with myself. But I never really realized I was fighting on the wrong side, because the inner critic would be saying that and I'd be agreeing and I'd be repeating it over and over and creating this identity where I was uncomfortable around people, socially awkward, where I was stupid, where I'd never, ever amount to anything. And it wasn't until somebody introduced me to the idea that the inner critic, the entity, the inner dialogue, the ego, that's not who I am. It's an aspect of who I am, but it's not who I am. And here's the painful part. People around you often reinforce your old identity because it also keeps them comfortable. It's almost like mirroring. You stay the same, I stay the same. Like their ego is threatened by your change. Like in relationship and everything. One of the biggest threats to a relationship is people moving forward if the other one isn't ready or isn't willing. See, they know how to react to the old you, but the new you, the growing you, the healed you, the ambitious you, the boundary setting you, that version disrupts the system. And sometimes your growth will only make other people uncomfortable. And it's not because you're doing something wrong, but because transformational forces cause them to confront their own stagnation. When they see the energy of you moving forward, they are threatened by their own lack of moving forward. And then they have a choice. They can lash out at you or they can change. Some people will miss the version of you they could control. And that hurts, but it's true. One of the loneliest parts of reinvention is realizing that not everyone can come with you because not everyone is ready to shift. So let's talk about the loneliness of reinvention. And nobody talks about this part, the silence, the distance, the weird feeling of becoming unfamiliar to your own life. You start changing. And suddenly the old conversations feel empty. Think about it, right? When you start moving forward, when you start learning, you start growing, and you start getting inspired, the old, how's the weather, it just doesn't hit the same. See, old habits start to feel heavy. You stop laughing at the things you once used to laugh at. You stop tolerating the things you used to tolerate. And for a while, you actually don't fully belong anywhere. Like literally, you don't know who you are. You're not fully connected to your old identity, but not yet grounded in a new one. And in that middle phase, that's sacred. But it feels lonely. I think back to all the different things I was working on in my life. And I remember a couple moments. There was time when I realized that something I was holding on to was holding me back from life, like so powerfully holding me back that I knew I had to give it up, but I was terrified. And I didn't know how to let it go. And just the fact that I had to let this go was terrifying me. Like my heart was racing, pounding in my chest and ears. And I didn't know what to do, but I decided that I would take on a mantra of I surrender, I surrender, I surrender. And for 72 hours, for 3 days, my constant mantra inside my head was I surrender, I surrender, I surrender. And it came to a peak on a Sunday night when I would volunteer to clean a yoga studio. It came to the peak when I was alone in that yoga studio. And I heard my inner critic I think it was even bigger than an inner critic at that point. I feel like it was my dragon. Every one of us has a dragon we need to fight someday. And I felt like I was in a mythical battle with my dragon. And it was telling me, if you let that go, if you let this go, you'll be alone forever. Nobody will ever want you again. You're never, ever going to have one. And there was so much fear. And yet the understanding that it just wanted to keep me in this same place. There was no joy in this place. There was no moving forward. There was no opportunity. So finally, I came face to face with my dragon. I pulled my sword. It's like a mythical battle. I always thought, you see mythical battles, you see warriors with swords and they're going to fight the dragon. And I realized that this is never going to end through force. There's only one way to end this. And so in the middle of that yoga studio, in the middle of the night, all alone, I got down on my knees and I dropped my sword and I bared my throat to the dragon. I said, take my life. Take my friends. Take everything from me, but this ends here. See, not all battles are like killing things. Some battles are surrender. And then it went, and there was silence. And it was a different silence that I've ever felt in my life because there was such a space in my life in that moment. And I was walking, and I could almost feel molecules of air flowing over my body as I was walking through. I had this incredible clearness, and the internal dialogue wasn't there. It was an amazing moment. And it's interesting because a lot of things changed after that. There were some people that no longer fit in my life. And there were some people that I was keeping in my life even though they weren't good for me. And I just moved away. Because sometimes you outgrow people you love deeply. And, that doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest because love does not always equal alignment. And growth requires honesty. You're allowed to become someone your past no longer recognizes. Yes, you are. And some listeners need to hear that today. You're allowed to evolve. You're allowed to change your mind, change your direction, change your standards, change your habits, change your identity. You're not betraying your past. You owe nothing to the past. You're honoring your future. You owe everything to your future. So, what if the confusion you feel right now is not failure? What if it is expansion, right? Remember I said, in order to create something new, you have to create a blank slate. What if the discomfort, the uncertainty, the emotional exhaustion is simply the psychological frictioning of becoming? Think about it. Caterpillars literally dissolve before becoming butterflies. Just when the caterpillar thought all life was over, when it found itself in complete darkness, it transformed and it emerged as a butterfly. Think about that. This is a phase where they become basically biological soup, not recognizable structures, not familiar identity, just breakdown. But hidden inside the breakdown is transformation. Maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you're not broken, but you are actually becoming. And this line sticks. Your life falls apart differently when it's falling into alignment. Yeah, maybe you're not falling apart. You're falling together. There's a difference between destruction and reconstruction. One leaves you empty, the other creates space. And maybe the reason your old habits feel painful right now is because your soul has already outgrown them. Maybe the reason you feel disconnected from certain environments is because your future no longer fits there. Maybe the discomfort is not punishment. Maybe it's instruction. So how do you become something new? Not theoretically, but practically. Here's the first thing. Stop asking, what do I need to do? And start asking, who do I need to become? Because behavior follows identity. You will always act in alignment with who you believe you are. If you believe you're weak, you will hesitate. If you believe you're unworthy, you will self-sabotage. If you believe you're incapable, you will unconsciously avoid pain. So the work's not just external, it's identity level work. So here are some powerful practices for them. First off, audit your identity language. Pay attention to how you describe yourself, because words become psychological instruction. Stop saying, I've always been this way. You're just creating a prison for yourself. Replace it with, I'm learning, I'm becoming, I am evolving. All creation happens in language. Language matters. 2, normalize the grief of growing. Stop expecting transformation to feel comfortable. It won't, not even a little. They called them growing pains when we were young for a reason, and now we're going through a different kind. Growth often feels like loss before it feels like freedom. You're shedding identities, patterns, relationships. You're shedding versions of yourself. The grief is not evidence you're failing. It's just evidence that something old is ending. 3, create evidence for your future self. Your future identity is built through repeating proof. Small promises kept, small acts of courage, small moments of discipline. You don't have to go all in and crazy on everything. Start small, build to medium, achieve big. Confidence is not born from thinking. It's built through evidence. 4, and this is really important because the people you hang around with, the people you spend time with are so important. Spend time with people who expand you. Your environment shapes your identity. If everyone around you reinforces your limitation, your nervous system will normalize smallness. You need people, conversations, books, experience that expand you, that remind you there's more inside you. I need you to hear this part carefully. The version of you that got you here deserves compassion. The version that version survives things. It protected you. It adapted. It learned to cope. It built strength. It built systems, ways to make it. Do not hate your former self. Honor them. But don't stay them forever, because survival is not the final destination. Living is. Really living is. And if you're here for big things, incredible living is. And there comes a moment when you must stop asking your wounded self for permission to grow. You cannot heal by remaining loyal to an identity that created the pain. Some people are trying to protect themselves from a world that no longer exists, still living emotionally inside old wounds, old fears, old humiliations, old heartbreaks. But your future cannot open if your identity is still chained to the past. The life you want requires courage, but not the courage to work harder, the courage to become unfamiliar to yourself, the courage to battle the inner critic, the ego, the sense of identity, the courage to release identities that no longer serve you, the courage to disappoint expectations, the courage to evolve publicly, and the courage to be misunderstood through the whole process of becoming. And yes, that can feel lonely. But loneliness is sometimes the space between identities, not the absence of purpose. So take a moment and take a breath and pause. Think about how much of your suffering comes from trying to remain who you used to be. How much energy have you spent trying to preserve identities that you've already outgoing? And what if you stop fighting your evolution? What if this season is not asking you to hold tighter, but to let go deeper? And close your eyes for a second if it's safe, if you can. And imagine meeting the future version of yourself, not the perfect version, the aligned version, the healed version, the courageous version, the honest version. What would they thank you for enduring right now? What would they beg you to not quit on? Because one day you're going to look back at this season and realize the confusion was transformation, the loneliness was preparation, and the discomfort, that was expansion. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're in transformation. You're in transition. And these are messy. Seeds break open before they grow. Muscles tear before they strengthen. Identities collapse before lives transform. This is nature. That is growth. The person you are becoming will cost you the person you have been. Your new life will cost you your old life, but it will be worth every penny. Because there is a version of you waiting on the other side of this season that feels free. Not fearless, not perfect, but free. Free from old stories, free from self-betrayal, free from identities built in survival mode. And maybe for the first time in your life, you'll finally feel like yourself. Not programmed self, not wounded self, not the performative self, the real you. And when that day comes, you'll realize something extraordinary. You're never losing yourself. You weren't. You're finding yourself underneath everything you had to become to survive. So, hey, if this episode spoke to you, don't ignore that feeling. That feeling is your future knocking. Answer it. That is your internal advocate pulling you towards transformation. It's time. See you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Your Inner Advocate, a podcast by Kimmin Peterson, formerly Conversations with Kimmin. If you found value in today's episode, please follow, like, and share the podcast with someone who you think may benefit from it. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and connect on Instagram at your_inner_advocate. Until next time, keep listening to and developing your inner advocate.